Hey guys, Todd here. Today we're going to install the 2.5-inch lift kit from Superlift on this all-wheel drive Maverick. Now I'll be using regular shop tools, including a strut compressor, pass-through socket set, and also a torque wrench. Now make sure you're subscribed to our channel to keep up to date with all the latest content. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, here we are underneath the hood. We are on the passenger side here. I've already gone ahead and disconnected the negative battery terminal. Now we need to get to the top of our strut tower mount to be able to undo our strut from the mount. And first thing we got to do in order to do that is pull this apart. So this needs to come off with a 10mm. And then we've got several clips running across this wiper cover. So we need to go ahead and pull those out. We're going to use a flat blade screwdriver to do that. Make sure you keep all this stuff. There's one hidden back here too. Okay, now on the passenger side only, what we're going to need to do is move our washer fluid fill neck out of the way so that we can pry this up. We're going to take a 10mm and pull out this bolt. Got a pry bar. I've actually wrapped some tape around it so I'm not scratching anything up while I'm doing this. What we're going to do is lift up, and what we're going to see is we've got 3 bolts need to come out here, here, and one right back here. It's going to be very hard for you guys to see. This one's the most difficult to get to, but you're going to use a 13mm to pull all 3 of those out. Okay, right now we are up underneath the passenger side at the front. I've already gone ahead and taken the tire off. I've got the truck supported by a 2-post lift. You can absolutely use jack stands for this. That's no problem. Just make sure you're well secured. We're next going to go to our tie rod end. We're going to remove this nut using a 15mm. Then we're going to strike the boss here to break that loose so the tie rod can come out. All right, next we need to go ahead and disconnect our sway bar link. What we're going to use is an 18mm on the nut. I'm going to use a ratcheting wrench. That way I can get T40 Torx onto the inside here to hold it still. All right, now on the bottom end of the sway bar link, we're going to do the same thing, 18mm with a 40, T40, and go ahead and remove the sway bar link. All right, next we want to go ahead and detach our ABS line from our strut. What we're going to do is first wiggle this right here loose and pull that out. And next we're going to use a fastener removal tool to pry this loose down here. All right, now over here on this side, we've got a bolt that holds our brake line in place. We're going to pull that out using an 8mm and pull the brake line out. Okay, now back on this side, we're going to go ahead and take these 2 nuts off using a 21mm. Then we can strike these bolts and pop them out using a little mallet. That way we can wiggle our strut loose and pull it all the way out. All right, next we're going to use a grinder to take off a little bit of this edge right here on the shock. What that does is that saves your boot. Now, once we've taken that edge off, we're going to clean it up and spray it with some black spray paint to prevent rust. Okay, now I've got the strut in a wall mount compressor. You can use a McPherson strut compressor as well, that will work too. But what we're gonna do is go ahead and compress this so we can take off the top plate. Okay, now one thing I want to point out before we take this apart is that this has actually got a little mark. It's a little green mark from the factory. As you're pulling this apart, this is going to start to swivel around, so you want to make sure you know where that mark is. If it is not marked, I would use something like a silver Sharpie to make a mark, or a grease pencil, so you know where to set it back up to realign it. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take an 18 millimeter. I'm using a pass-through socket because we're going to put the 18 millimeter on there. And then we're also going to use a 6 millimeter Allen wrench and go through the top of that bolt. That way we can hold it still while we take this off. All right, so now let's go ahead and pull off the top plate and separate it from the boot. That way we can pull this apart and install our preload spacer. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and take our top plate and we're gonna pull our isolator off of our top plate. Next, we can take our preload spacer and set it onto the top plate and press it down. Now we're gonna take our isolator and put it back in place and make sure we're clocked with our mark to line up to where our marks are. All right, now we can go ahead and reinstall our top plate with the spacer and decompress the strut. We're using the exact same tools and the factory hardware from when we pulled it off. Okay, now what we're going to do is use our included hardware, bolt, lock washer, and flat washer, insert them into the bottom holes on our top spacer. Now, because you got a welded nut up top, sometimes they're a little bit more difficult to squeeze in there, but they do fit. Once they're all lined up in the holes, go ahead and line it up to the top plate and start them all by hand, and then you can tighten them down with a 13 millimeter. Now, if you get one of the bolts that falls out and you need to reinsert it, you want to make sure that these are loosened up a little bit to where you have some wiggle room to where you can splay this apart so you can get it inserted back in and then start those threads. That's the reason why you don't want to tighten these down before you have all three of them started. But then once you have all three of them just on their finger tight, go ahead and use a 13 millimeter and tighten them down. All right, now another quick tech tip to keep this from spinning while you're tightening down. Just take a long screwdriver, throw it in opposite from where the bolt is you're working on. All right, now we're ready to go ahead and reinstall it. All right, now we can go ahead and set the factory strut back in place and reattach it from the top with the factory hardware. Now the best way that I found to put this back in is just kind of go right through here and then line it up, go up to the top. Now you might need some help holding this in place to line up those top hardware bolts from the factory. All right, once we put our factory hardware in place and get it lined up, don't tighten it down all the way just yet. First, we're going to go ahead and attach everything down below. All right, now we can go ahead and realign the knuckle back up with a strut and reattach the factory hardware. Keep in mind that this strut can be twisted a little bit in order to get everything lined up. All right, now because these bolts are splined at the end, we can go ahead and tap them in place with a little mini sledge. When we tighten them down, it's going to draw them down the rest of the way. Go ahead and put those on and snug it up with a 21 millimeter. And torque these down to factory spec. All All right, now we can go ahead and install our new sway bar link bracket. What this is going to do, we've got some supplied hardware. It's going to come up from the back of where the sway bar was attached. That bracket is going to slide over top of that hardware. Make sure it's nested all the way back up in place. Take the supplied flat washer and serrated flange nut and get that started on there. Once you got it in, we're going to tighten it down using an 18mm on the front and then also on the back to hold it in place. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install our new sway bar link. If you notice, you got a couple of flat spots on the link. What we're going to do is take a 17mm wrench and just kind of hold that still. We're going to take and insert that from the back. Then take our supplied hardware, put that on there. That's an 18mm that we're going to tighten down. All right, now we can go ahead and connect the sway bar link to the sway bar using the same procedure. Okay, now we can go ahead and reattach our ABS lines to the brackets. And pop it back in place. All right, next we can go ahead and reattach our tie rod end to our knuckle using the factory hardware. We're going to tighten it down using a 15mm, and then we're going to hold it up top with a 7mm. Make sure that gets torqued to factory spec. Okay, back up underneath the hood, we're going to go ahead and tighten down all of the factory hardware holding the factory strut. Make sure that goes to torque specs from the factory. And we can go ahead and reattach all of our hardware using a 10mm here, and also with our windshield washer fluid reservoir, and reattach all of our clips. Okay, now we're at the rear of the vehicle. I've got the vehicle secured onto a 2-post lift. Obviously, you can do this with jacks and jack stands. But what I'm going to do, I'm on the passenger side, we're going to remove the lower sway bar mount. This is an 18mm nut. We're going to take that off using 18mm. And if it starts to spin, we've also got a T40 we can push into the center to hold it in place. Okay, now here is our upper control arm. We need to loosen this bolt where it attaches to the knuckle. We're going to do that with a 15mm. Do not take it all the way out though. Okay, now here is our lower control arm. I've got this supported with a floor jack right now. Where our knuckle attaches and where our shock attaches, we've got a couple of bolts going through. We're going to go ahead and pull those out with a 15mm. As I pull those out, we've got a flag nut on the other side that's going to fall off, so I'm going to catch those as we go. All right, now we can go ahead and gently lower our support and remove the rear coil spring. Okay, now our two rubber isolators at the bottom and the top, we're going to need to pull those assemblies off. The bottom one, just pull it straight out. You've got a guide pin, so you don't have to mark it. We know where it's going to go back in. The top one, I've already gone ahead and marked where it lines up to the vehicle. So we're going to go ahead and pull that down as well. Okay, for our location right now, we are right at the back mud flap. This is right behind the back seat. This is our rear trailing arm. We're going to follow that up. We've got a couple of bolts that hold that in. We're going to remove those 2 bolts using a 15 millimeter. Okay, now for each side, we've got a spacer. It's going to go between our trailing arm and the frame up here, or the subframe. Just going to fit that in place. And now we've also got some supplied hardware that's going to go up through the spacers. We're going to get it threaded in first. And go ahead and tighten them down to factory torque spec. Okay, here are our 2 isolators we pulled off of the truck. This is the lower isolator for the spring. This is the upper spring isolator. Now, the lower spring isolator is going to get a couple of spacers. These are thicker spacers than our upper isolator. So the 2 thicker spacers are going to stack on top of each other. Then we've also got our isolator locating pin here, but that's not big enough to go all the way through and still work as a pin. So what we're going to do is pull that apart. And on the bottom side of the pin, you're going to see this. There's a little hole. We're going to take a drill with a 1/4 inch drill bit, and we're just going to widen that out. Okay, next what we can do is take out of our kit, we've got a 6 millimeter bolt. It's going to drop down through there. We can take and line this back up the same way it came off. So fit that in place. That's going to actually hold our bolt in there too. And now we can take our 2 spacers and use the hole in the spacers for the isolator bolt. And let's go ahead and take this back over to the truck. All right, now we can go ahead and set our lower isolator with spacers back into place. Make sure you use your bolt as a guide pin to go down through this hole. I've also gone ahead and cleaned off this surface very thoroughly. You don't want any kind of grit or grime in between these mating surfaces. All right, for the top isolator mount, make sure it's nice and clean, just the same. The spacers, nothing holding that in place, so you're just going to use the friction of the isolator to hold it. Now make sure that our mark is going to line up to our original mark, and wiggle that up into place. All right, now we're going to go ahead and pull this down, lift up our spring, make sure it goes back in the same orientation that it came out. So we want to make sure that that goes into the isolator the same way. Also, I did note that the tag was on the top of the spring, so I've got the top at the top and the bottom at the bottom. All right, now we're going to go ahead and raise this up and watch as our holes line up. As the holes line up, go ahead and put our factory hardware back in there. We're going to torque these to factory spec. Okay, now we're back at our lower sway bar mount. We're going to go ahead and reattach that. In order to get that to line up, it's probably best to put some pressure on the bottom of your lower control arm and get it lined up. Then you can slide it through and put the factory hardware back on. We're going to use an 18 millimeter pass-through along with a T40 Torx. Tighten that up. Make sure you tighten that to factory spec. All right, now we can go ahead and retighten our upper control arm bolt back to factory spec. Well, we reconnected the negative battery terminal, put on the new wheels and tires, and took it down for an alignment. That concludes the installation. Guys, if you found this video helpful, make sure and give us a thumbs up. If you want to know more about the product, check the link in the description below. And as always, if you have any questions, call the experts or visit us online.